All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel where we focus on learning about theories of everything that could impact your life in a positive manner if you only knew about them and studied up on them. And so we study things that are pretty obscure and mildly esoteric, but of great interest if you can kind of get your teeth into them and get a little taste of it, then you'll start to dig. And so each one of these videos is designed to try to get you a little taste of it so that you're a little bit more motivated to really dig in. And today is the 282nd video that we've done on Dewey Larson's reciprocal system of theory. And this theory was first, kind of imagined by Mr. Larson back in about 1930. Spent a couple decades working out the finer points through a process of induction, and put together his two fundamental postulates in the late 1950s. Then he, through a process of deduction, deduced an entire theoretical universe from those two postulates and wrote books in furtherance of his findings. He died in 1990, and then it developed somewhat of a following, very small, but dedicated following. And after he died, especially after he died, some other researchers came to the fore and did a little bit of revising of his theory, but stayed true to the fundamental postulates, or at least the first fundamental postulate and the spirit of the theory. And we're going to look at one of those writers today, Dr. Bruce Perrett. But first, let me just give you the once-over on the reciprocal system. In Larson's reciprocal system, we live in a universe of motion. The universe is made entirely of motion. Not matter, not energy, but motion. And matter and energy are, in fact, just two different varieties of motion. And other people have come up with that before, a universe made out of motion. But what distinguished Larson is that he defined motion as the relationship between space and time. Time and space are merely two different aspects of the same thing. They are kind of like, Larson sometimes uses the analogy of a box. If you have a box, you have automatically the inside and the outside of the box. So it's a package deal. You get all three. You get the box, the inside, and the outside. And motion is kind of like the box. The inside is kind of like space, and the outside is kind of like time, or possibly vice versa. But that's one way of looking at it. Although another way is that motion is a fraction, with time or space as the numerator and space or time as the denominator. Except that you have to keep a few things in mind, which is basically Larson's first postulate. Space and time both have their coordinate aspects, meaning that they come in 3 or more dimensions. Everything that adheres to space also adheres to time. They're reciprocals of one another. So whatever qualities space has, time also has, and vice versa. So uh, one of the main things that we do know about space is that it is multidimensional, three-dimensional. If you are a fan of Buckminster Fuller, you might say four-dimensional. If you are into Lobachevsky and other people like that, you might say something else. But multidimensional. Larson said three-dimensional. I would say three or four. But that is something that we take for granted about space. And Larson is saying that time also has those same qualities, coordinate time. And then one thing that we know about space is that it has its clock aspect, clock time. The clock is always getting later and later and later. This is what Larson calls a scalar motion, a motion that has a magnitude, but it has no particular direction. The clock is always getting later and later and later, but in no particular direction. And since this is a quality of time that we're generally accustomed to, we know from the reciprocal postulate that that is also a quality of space. Space has its clock aspect. Clock space is that everything is always getting farther and farther and farther apart in no particular direction. You can envision this using a balloon with put some dots on it, blow up the balloon, all the dots are moving away from each other. Or if you want to go with an extra dimension, just not on the surface of the balloon, you could imagine some raisin bread in the oven. You put it in the oven, and it expands. All of the raisins are moving away from each other, but in no particular direction. This was also observed by the Hubble telescope that determined that all of the distant galaxies are moving away from each other. This is the aspect clock space, or the flow of space, the progression of space. And then the third stipulation of the first postulate is that space and time both are quantized. They come in only discrete units. You have to have a full unit of space or time to have any space or time. Now, those units are very small, microscopic, instantaneous, but they do exist. And if you don't have a full unit, you have nothing. And if you don't have two full units, then you only have one. And if you don't have three full units, then you only have two. And if you have one unit of space in one unit of time, you have the speed of light, which is what Larson calls unit speed. 1 over 1 equals 1. And this quantized aspect, or the discrete unit postulate, is a fundamental part of Larson's reciprocal system. The speed of light in Larson's system is the midpoint of this universe, or the null point, or the neutral point, or really even like the 0 point. Any number to the 0 power equals 1. So, you might think of it as the 0 power point. And that means that there is an entire half of the universe that is moving faster than the speed of light, which Larson calls the cosmic sector, and which legacy science knows absolutely nothing, or very, very little. And then there's the half of the universe that legacy science is familiar with, which is moving slower than the speed of light. And Larson calls that the material sector. And, so Einstein says that the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe. So that shows that he only knew about the material sector, and he disavowed any even disavowed the rules, didn't even permit a cosmic sector in Einstein's system. So those are the basic gist. That's the basic gist of the first postulate. The second postulate is simply that the universe conforms to the laws of ordinary commutative mathematics. Its magnitudes are absolute, and its geometry is Euclidean. Now, the author we're looking at today, Dr. Bruce Perret, took Larson to task on that idea of Euclidean geometry. And Perret, along with Dr. KVK Nehru, eventually arrived at what they call RS2, the reciprocal system 2, or the re-evaluation of the reciprocal system. And in this system, Dr. Perret changed the second postulate to include what he called projective geometry, which is a more inclusive term than Euclidean. It includes Euclidean geometry, but it is basically a geometrical cascade moving in one or the other direction, from projective geometry to affine geometry to metric geometry, and then finally to Euclidean geometry as a subset of projective geometry. We will get into that at some point down the road, but today we're looking at an article that Dr. Perret wrote under the pen name of Daniel Phoenix 3, and you may know that the Phoenix 3 project was a government top secret black project focused on time travel, and it also included the Philadelphia experiment, the Montauk project, and the Philadelphia experiment, which occurred in 1983, and was a fiasco, according to all the people that participated that I've seen, including Duncan Cameron and Al Bielek and one other guy who wrote a lot about rock and roll too. Can't remember his name right now, but Bruce Perret, as Daniel, claimed that he was there as well as one of the young computer programmers. And he writes under this name when he writes his more speculative material having to do with the reciprocal system. And this article is called Geoengineering, Chemtrails, HARP, World Orders, Timelines, and Ascension. And we have, this is our fourth episode of this, so you might want to go back to the start of this article 3 episodes ago to get the whole thing. But hopefully you might be able to get something out of it right now. This section is called A Hot Time in the Old World Tonight. If you were NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or the powers that be, and knew the sun was constantly getting hotter, but did not know the specifics because you listened to conventional scientists with their backward stellar evolution, what would you likely do? Obviously, come up with a long-term strategy to deal with the excess heat. Back in the 1950s, a study was made on such a possibility and came up with 3 alternatives. 1, use nuclear weapons to blow holes in the upper atmosphere to let the increasing heat out. 2, create huge underground cities to live in until the sun stabilized. Or 3, get the heck off of Earth. The first one was a bit preposterous and could not be pulled off without public knowledge, so they started the second and third. The underground bunker approach was simple enough as one of the features of HARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, was that it was able to probe well beneath the surface of the Earth looking for oil and mineral resources, but also identified large caverns that would make excellent cities for them to stockpile and ride out the transition in comfort. Construction of these underground bunkers has been in progress for decades, and Alternative 2 is nearing completion. NASA came into existence shortly after this report was issued, some believe as a direct consequence of Alternative 3. Their mission was to find out what was out there, and what they found was that mankind is not going anywhere else anytime soon. With Alternative 3 not viable, and knowing they would be stuck here with the rest of us, and not particularly wanting to live underground all their lives, they needed to come up with a way to make their utopia on Earth, and that is geoengineering. Change this planet to be resistant to these solar changes they knew were coming, and keep their corporatocracy going. Let's see. I'm just looking at some of the footnotes before we move to the next section. It does say here, and I mean, I've heard Perret say this, but I haven't seen any archives of this. But he does say that Larson gave many lectures to NASA back in the 1960s when they were trying to get into space. So it is highly probable that they know what is going on, at least in the upper echelon. That is the only place that I have seen that allegation. Okay, and then he says, after discovering that the ionosphere reacted strongly to HAARP transmissions, the project was militarized. It says, see patent 4,686,605. Method and apparatus, the title of the patent is Method and Apparatus for Altering a Region in the Earth's Atmosphere, Ionosphere, and or Magnetosphere. And can now create atmospheric lenses that can be used to focus the sun's rays on a specific area, causing a localized rise in ground, ocean, or atmospheric temperatures. This updraft creates a low pressure system at low altitudes, and a high pressure system at high altitudes, and can be used to modify the flow of weather patterns. Okay, now this next section is called Geoengineering, Customizing the Planet. First thing they had to deal with was the sun getting a lot brighter from the combination of dust and debris now present in significant quantities in the solar system. They needed to come up with a way to create a global dimming effect to block off this bright light. Aluminum, a nice, lightweight, and very abundant element, works rather well for that, as most of our mirrors today are coated with aluminum, not silver. Nanoparticles distributed in the tropopause about 7 miles up would increase the albedo of the sun and turn the upper atmosphere into a partially reflecting mirror. This has the result of global dimming on the surface. Next problem is the X-ray bursts. The Van Allen belts protect the Earth from most particulate radiation that comes from coronal mass ejections, but the magnetic field barely slows down X-rays. Fortunately, back in the 1950s, a technology became available that had to address a similar problem. the cathode ray tube, or CRT. CRTs were a large X-ray emitter pointed right at the person watching the screen. That's television. To get this technology out, they had to develop something to block X-rays, but not interfere with the picture. They tried lead, but after being bombarded with X-rays for a while, a lead film turned brown and messed things up. It was okay for the sides of the tube, but not the picture screen. Searching around, they found a couple of oxides that did an excellent job at blocking X-rays and stayed viable for a long time without browning out. This was a combination of barium and strontium. They also expect huge particulate radiation from both coronal mass ejections and the solar heat up. So they looked for a way to increase the magnetic flux in the upper atmosphere, which has been popularized now as magnetic reconnection, not a natural phenomenon. Aluminum, barium, and strontium are paramagnetic, and what was really needed was a ferromagnetic material, higher magnetism. How about another popular metal like iron? Might make the sky and rain turn a bit reddish on occasion from iron oxide or rust. But you could just say the people who saw that were crazy. And so what if thunderstorms got massively more violent from the conductive metals in the atmosphere, supercell storms? People don't pay attention to things like that, right? So they developed a technique to disperse aluminum, barium, strontium, and iron in the atmosphere using the 10,000 plus aircraft that are in the sky every hour of every day. All they had to do was develop an aerosol and fuel additive and let her fly to get her done. Couple the aerosol dispersion system with a GPS, and you can even control precisely where the chemtrails get dumped without the pilots ever realizing anything is happening. Now, if you look at chemtrail fallout in snow, ice, and rain, what do you find? Aluminum hydroxide, barium oxide, strontium oxide, and iron oxide. The same elements listed on climate modification and geoengineering patents. What a coincidence. As to the question of global warming, yes, the planet is heating up. However, due to the global dimming created by the chemtrail project, that heating up actually turned to a bit of cooling for a short time, causing conspiracy theorists to say the whole planet warming thing was a farce. But if you've been outside lately, it is obvious that the sun is significantly brighter than it used to be, particularly at the higher elevations. And the chemtrail sunscreen is failing, though they constantly double efforts to reinforce it. The experts are well aware of the sun becoming brighter and hotter, but you can't get the sun to pay carbon taxes for... Alrighty, I believe my phone overheated there while I was recording this, and we were basically out of time anyway, so we will start up with this next paragraph when we come back tomorrow. So thank you for tuning in, and have a great day.